Hello and welcome back to the QCraft Ditch Summit, where we are all about the intersection of technology and sound teaching and making pedagogy reachable and accessible to everyone. And I am your host, Matt Miller, the author of Ditch That Textbook. And I am super, super pumped to do this interview today with three ladies who have who inspire me, but also have created something that has become kind of a stir around the education community. And so we're going to be talking all about HyperDocs, but not specifically like the details of what HyperDocs are and how you put the links in and all of that stuff. We're going to be talking about the powerful learning that happens because of them. And really, when we use technology in the classroom, that's what it should all revolve around, is how we can amplify that learning. It's like what you hear so many people say, that it's not about the technology, it's about the learning that comes out of it. So that's going to be the big focus here. So let's jump it over to the three of you. So could we hear from everybody what your name is, where you are, what you do, that kind of thing? And we'll start, and we're going to go left to right on my screen. So we'll do Kelly and then Lisa and then Sarah. So Kelly, you want to start?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Hilton, longtime Pleasanton teacher and instructional coach, and super excited to talk about HyperDocs with all of you today.
I'm Lisa Highfill, and I also have taught in Pleasanton Unified for a long time, and now I'm the instructional tech coach in the district.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah Landis, and I currently teach in Pleasanton as an instructional coach, but I've had the opportunity to work in districts all over the Bay Area and even New York City. So we bring different perspectives to the work that we do, and we're just always excited to talk about HyperDocs and pedagogy.
Right, which is what totally drives it, right?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those of us that aren't in California that are watching this, Pleasanton is in California. It's fairly close to San Francisco. I know that because I've been at least pretty close to there. And Pleasanton is different from Pleasantville, right?
Oh yeah. Kind of close, but we're in color here.
There's a couple of similarities.
Right, yeah, maybe a couple of similarities. That's right. If you've never seen the show before, go Google it. But yeah, so we're gonna be diving into HyperDocs and what they all are. But I think that the thing that really sort of drives it, the place that I'd like for us to start, is this idea of lesson design, because we could talk about lesson planning, but lesson planning is so like yesterday. I feel like the idea of lesson design, lesson design is the new black. And so I was hoping that we could start this off with the idea of, just generally talking about what do we mean by that, and how is that maybe different from traditional lesson planning?
Do you guys want me to jump in?
Sarah, that sounds like a you.
I love this topic because I know, like when we were writing the book, we did a lot of research around this, and because we all come from different experiences, we all have like favorite kind of like go-to templates, if you will, or structures that lived in our classrooms. But we've been out of the credential programs for quite a while. And so we did kind of slow down and go back and revisit some of that good teaching structure and theory and design and all that. So I think what we were able to do is pull together some of our favorite kind of like lesson design templates, because I think that we all need somewhere to start from. So how great is Lisa's going to show an example of this. So after doing our research, we discovered that basically if you're a science teacher, your go-to method tends to be the 5 E's model. If you are a workshop model teacher, you'll go to the workshop model template. We studied the work of Ramsey Muslim, who was doing a lot of research around that flipped learning and basically taking the explore portion and doing explore, explain, apply. So what we did was say, you know what, there's all these good parts in each of those more traditional lesson design models, and we built our own kind of hybrid. And so we just call that the HyperDoc model, and that's what we have in front of you now. And we basically start with an engagement, because I think any good lesson starts with hooking our kids, whatever you want to call it, anticipatory set, whatnot. and then go into the explore portion. And we love doing the explore before the direct instruction time, because it's so valuable to let kids sit back and either just build content knowledge, build schema, or just flat out build curiosity. And so we love having kids dive deep into content before the teacher even steps in, because half the time they learn on their own anyway, or ask really good questions that are then going to drive the explain portion. And that tends to be, that little moment where you either say, hey, let's put the technology away. Let's have some face-to-face discussion. I really want to teach you, blah, blah, blah. And so then we've got that explain portion built in. Of course, that can also be done differently. There's no one way to explain a concept. So sometimes that can be like a step-by-step tutorial, or because you can use technology for that as well, if that's the best option. And then we go into that application. And of course, we all know like applying learning is really what helps it stick, what helps learning transfer from teacher to student, from content area to content area, from adult to child, whatever. So that application is where the wealth of like technology tools comes into play. And there's so many incredible options out there, but we really wanted to make sure that that applied portion was built into our hybrid design theory. And then some of the things that are just near and dear to our hearts are the opportunities to give kids a chance to share and to reflect. That share piece is kind of what opens up the four walls of our classrooms. And really that's what, crowdsourcing and 21st century citizens are really asked to do. It's not just about us anymore. We're putting ourselves out there all the time. So we wanted to make sure we built that into the template design. And then that reflection, I know John Dewey has his famous quote about like, we don't learn by doing, but we learn by reflecting on the doing. And so I know that's always the hardest one to keep in there. The recess bell rings or next period is filing in. So we put that into our hybrid design because we know that if it's there, then it'll help us stick to it. And so just kind of staying true to some of the parts of teaching that are, I think, critical to learning. And then, of course, we wanted to add that extension in there because we have kids that finish things early. And so it's always nice to have something to work towards if you're one of those fast finishers, or if you struggle to get through your content, you have a motivational piece at the end waiting for you. And so, and the extension is always fun to put in there too, because we have kids that go home and want to learn on their own, or they're interested in our topic or whatnot. So that's kind of a lot of what we did with our own work with building HyperDocs and building our hybrid design, because we just kind of wanted to like make sure that we built something that had all of our favorite parts of good teaching in there. And so that keeps us on track. But of course, not every HyperDoc has to have all of those parts. Not every HyperDoc, design has all the same parts to it. But it's nice to be able to pick and choose. And I know sometimes, like, as much as I've been out of my credential program, it's so nice to go back and have a structure. And it just kind of helps me lesson design quicker. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to put my reflection in there. And so
I'm going to chime in here. We both were like, that was so well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That has been amazing. Like, we're the biggest lesson planning nerds ever. So, like, we love this. This is what we do for a living as a coach. We just go in and lesson plan with people. But there are a lot of people out there who are into this also, like kind of bringing that energy back and that love of that designing instructional experiences. That has been a big aha for us, that we found a lot of people like this and enjoy talking to other people about it, whether they build a lesson together or do it alone. They just want to like talk about it and share it. And that's been an amazing part of this.
I mean, teachers are really good at teaching on the fly. I mean, we are skilled. Our craft is like making decisions like this, right? And so sometimes when you do choose to HyperDoc something, because you don't HyperDoc every lesson, it is really nice to slow down and think through some of those parts or those decisions. We always say it's like a series of decisions that you make, right? So it's kind of nice to have some of that built in already so that you can just get in there and think about, okay, who are my kids? Okay, what tool's going to be best for this? And, So, yeah, we definitely love seeing teachers talk through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things about this that I love. First of all, if anybody wants to find that template that they just showed, you can go to hyperdocs.co, and it's under what's the tab that it's under?
Resources.
Resources. Okay.
And then there's a sub-tab called templates.
Templates. That's the one. Yeah. Okay. And so if you want to find, and if you noticed, you may or may not have noticed that when they had that up on the screen, that there were 1 million people viewing it. I don't really mean 1 million, but there was lots of people viewing it. And every time I pull that template up, it's the same way. There are lots of people that have that document open because it's so useful. And of course you can make a copy of that. And then that becomes your template that you can kind of build this off of. And so one thing that I love is that that's accessible to anybody. Secondly, that you look at that template, and whether you're creating a HyperDoc or if you're just lesson planning, you can use those steps because, like you said, it's based on learning theory that works. And so you start out with the engagement piece, and then you explore, and then you apply. I mean, you just go down through all of these, and it's not like a guaranteed foolproof way to lesson plan, but it's about as close as we've got, I think. And so that's the thing that I love about it too.
So Matt, just full disclosure, right? These girls are amazing, and we're explaining the whole template. However, we have to admit that when we started talking about HyperDocs, it really just came from our inner creativity. When we started talking about our own lessons, and we weren't naming it like we did when we were learning and teaching about lesson planning and designing, we actually had this long conversation on how do we create a space to have these conversations that are unique, and that not unique, but that we're speaking the same language. So when Sarah was talking about go back to your credential programs and everything you learned about great teaching, that is so true. But we realized teaching has totally changed from when we got our credentials. So we needed to reimagine like what else you can do in a lesson design.
Yeah.
Using all of these tools. So that's really where the template came from too. And also just acknowledging that you can put all those parts in, or you can just really use that as an idea to spark all the other. They don't have to go in that order. It's that whole creative process of imagining your design for your students.
Well, and shout out to Carly Mora for that template. She was a huge aha for us as we were getting her feedback in the very, very beginning about the benefits of teachers learning how to make HyperDocs and how helpful those templates were.
Absolutely.
She really was eye-opening for that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carly.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. She's amazing. And so, so what was I about to ask you guys? Okay. Now, all right. I got it. It took me just a second. So when we look at, it was, gosh, I'm all like scatterbrained here. We got like all on these different topics and I got all excited and I couldn't remember, but now I'm back on track. So you mentioned the template, and I mean, obviously you don't have to use every single piece of the template. It's not like, you have to use all of this stuff. But what I think is great about HyperDocs, since we're talking about, open pedagogy, since this is all about, Q craft and the idea of the craft of teaching and the pedagogy and everything. One of its biggest strengths, one of HyperDocs' biggest strengths, I think, is how student-centered it is and how it all revolves around the student and it puts the power into the student's hands. And so, and I think I've heard you all say that was one of the reasons that HyperDocs was designed the way that it is so that students can work through it at their own pace, but that student-centered, so it's great for students in that way. But it's also great for teachers because it frees teachers up to do things that they couldn't do if they were just doing the traditional stand and deliver. So I was hoping that you could touch on that a little bit about the power of the student-centered part of HyperDocs and how whenever we're doing real student-centered learning, how that can really change the classroom.
I think that's such a great question. And we love talking about that because as we started in our chat here, we were talking about lesson planning and lesson designing. And I know for a lot of years when I would lesson plan, I would jot down notes about like which lesson I was going to cover. It was just this like overview of the content and what I was just going to get done in the classroom. And that lesson lived in my plan book and it sat on the teacher's desk, right? And then when I started designing, and I think all of us share this experience, we started to really think about our students, and just the packaging itself starts by thinking about your students with a visual Usually we have at the top, if we use docs or slides, we start with a visual that will engage our learners and it brings them right into the topic right away. And then we package all of those parts of the lesson together. So one thing that we have observed with students is talk about organizing everything for your students from start to finish. And any student who has multiple classes, multiple teachers, multiple subjects that they're having to balance, which is all of our students, the HyperDoc helps organize it for them. And specifically, the students with executive functioning or who really need to think about, like, where is that piece of learning? So imagine a HyperDoc, and I'm going to show you one of my examples that I've been working on a little bit, but this one is called Humans. It's inspired by Humans of New York. And in this HyperDoc, you're starting with just this visual, but this is not a one-day HyperDoc. It's over the course of a week or so. So for students, they would be guided right back to this slide, these slides. And if anybody was absent or if they want to move ahead, that's sort of the self-pacing. But we do talk about teaching from that lesson. So they would go straight here to see, here's the topic. Here's our thing that we're working on, Humans of New York. We're going to be focusing on connecting and capturing stories. This second slide is the Explore slide. And it's just gives students that time. This could happen in a 30, 40-minute session where students are taking a look at samples, mentor texts. This is ultimately an extreme pedagogy makeover of writing narrative stories, but actually writing narrative stories and posting them online and connecting beyond your classroom with them. But let's start by looking at the stories that have already been published and studying mentor text. So if you think about it, again, for students, if they want to go back and look at this throughout the whole lesson, they now have it. And then the next couple of slides are direct instruction teaching slides, where I would typically go deeper as a whole group with these three parts of the story that I want the students to really think about, going beyond just writing a narrative, but how can you tell a story that's going to, make a difference? And then they move into a turn and talk. So what I love about this HyperDoc is, just like with the teacher, I'm going to remind myself that after we watch this video together, I'm going to stop and build in some off-tech conversation, some students just really getting to go deeper and reflect on that video before they move into the apply. And so then they move into the apply. The directions are there. It guides them through how to do that. It guides them through how to draft. I can monitor their progress here. I can give a lot of feedback. I can check for understanding. We can go back here and reference the other stories. It's all in one place together, and then come back and work on a draft. And then when we're done, then we move in to sharing it out. So I just think this one in particular, and most that we work on, kind of guide all the way there to that real thinking of, what am I going to do in the classroom? And what's great about this one, because we are talking about Adobe Spark Post, this is just a great tool that has been a wonderful way to have students publish and their work and capture their stories. So I've used this tool with Chromebooks, with laptops, with iPhones, with iPads, and really user-friendly for students to capture their stories. And
of course, Adobe Spark is the host, the fuel, so to speak, the sponsor of the QCraft Ditch Summit. And could you, just real quick, so we can go back to that, could you, Kelly, tell some folks what kinds of things are possible? Like, what can you create with Adobe Spark Post?
Absolutely. Adobe Spark Post has all of these graphic organizer templates, or you can start from scratch. And what the students can create, in fact, I'll show you some samples here, is in this particular lesson, they're taking a photograph and adding some captions to it. And this is a class here in Pleasanton where they were choosing a story that kind of captured themselves, and then they could put the graphic images around it. And I think it just is a great way to show what your message is, Chris is a devoted and hardworking runner. You're going to learn right about that image. And then combined with the Padlet here, which is where it is, they were telling the story in more detail with the text around it. But taking a look at some of these examples, just the small graphic image and the captions around Adobe Spark give students ideas for really making beautiful graphic design pieces.
Yeah.
This one's got multi-collage, it's like a little mini collage. And it makes you feel really successful, like you're quite the graphic designer when you use this tool.
And what I liked about that too is that it doesn't have to be big, flowy, detailed, intricate graphic design. Like some of that was, here's an image, here's a little caption at the bottom of it. And sometimes that's all that we need. And if we've got a simple tool that'll let us do that, then that's good. And actually, I'm glad that we talked about that just now, because that sort of flows logically into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. And that is, I know that the blinking cursor syndrome, you know, when you open up like a blank document and it's like, okay, it's time to write. And, you know, you're staring at this blank document and the cursor is blinking and you're going, oh man, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And I think that syndrome crosses over to the like blank HyperDoc template syndrome, where you might look at that template and think, oh my goodness, what am I going to put in this? You know? And so I think that the big overriding question here is, how do you figure out what to put into these blocks? Like, how do you get ideas from that? And where do you find the tools? And it's like, if you're bought into this, then do you have any tips for people on how to flesh out a really good, well-designed lesson using HyperDocs?
I actually could speak to that one, because I was working on a project this last fall with a teacher who I just have to give a shout out for Cassidy, because she was in my 5th grade class and now she's teaching 7th grade in our district. And it was amazing to work with her on a project. Building this HyperDoc. And we went through and we were just talking about, what are your goals? What are your objectives first? And then it was sort of that backward lesson design. Like, okay, we talked a little bit about, what do we want to end up with? Where do you want the kids? And then we started building backward like that, with really sitting down and thinking about that. And for me, sometimes it's a good video. I love good video, and I might be inspired and think, I've got to make a lesson around this video. So we were kind of doing this talk about doing a research project, something that would lead up to 20 time. How do we get kids to figure out what topic they want to research for 20% time? And I had been collecting a lot of videos around good ideas. And I have a whole playlist of them, actually. Every time I see a good idea, whether it's a kid made it up or an adult, I put it on a playlist. And I thought, what am I going to do with this playlist? This has got to be a lesson. This has to inspire kids. So we finally, I'm like, oh, she wants to do a research project. We have we are set. Now, when I started building this, and I'll share with you right now the idea. It was, it's actually the big template that we shared in the beginning. And I opened it up and I had to just make it look different right away. So I made the black background and just separated the boxes is all, you know, and put spaces. And I took the words off because I just was in a mood. So it really does have every piece from the original template, but I just wanted to make sure my words were really precise what I was building. And I mean, that's a little crazy, but so I started off with Mar Engage with this great video about these buildings in downtown San Francisco that are hosting bees and have beehives, and what that's doing for the bee population, because it's like something that I was kind of passionate about. I'd actually been researching, but that was only one of the videos from this playlist. It was just me teaching kids. Like, I can't just give kids a big playlist of videos and think that they're going to get something from it. I think that's a big mistake we would do. So I modeled, okay, guys, here's a video of a good idea, and let's process, let's reflect, and figure out what it is that you're supposed to be gaining from that. From watching that. Now that we've modeled together in the Engage piece, now you're off. You do it now with your good ideas playlist, and then post your ideas here. So it was kind of cool that if I'm going to ask them to, be thinking about these good ideas, I want them to then put their thinking in here. And so they could see each other's thinking right away. They were in partners doing this. That's also, the delivery of this is really important. This is not a HyperDoc I gave to them and said, have at it, go at your own pace, go through it. This first part and the second box were one day, a one class period. And saving time, not calling on one hand at a time, saying, what do you think of the videos? We posted it here, and that really compacted our time. That FaceTime is just so valuable in the classroom. But I'm going to get, we did the research part, and this was a guided lesson. This was maybe the heart of the lesson, I think. I don't know. We kept going, reflecting back on this and going, where was the heart of this lesson? Well, we did want to get research in here for a research project. And we wanted them to, more specifically about research, how do you evaluate credibility of a site? And that became, this was a whole day here where we went through and did a guided lesson on actually evaluating credibility. And I walked through my search on bees and how I actually did it. I don't know, Kelly was in the room.
I would like to add in, actually, because Lisa and I kind of did a combine a coach with this lesson. Where I was videotaping her teaching and I was coaching Cassidy to talk through like the strategies that we were observing so that she could see how to teach from the HyperDoc. So in that one section that Lisa was speaking to, it was about a 20 minute metacognitive think aloud on how you would keep digging deeper. But I think it's really important to comment that you did that, because we always ask kids to wonder or ask questions, but do we show them sometimes how, or give, and then not just give them time, but show them how too. So she was modeling that. And then the conversations that came after that was awesome.
I think, I think the conversations that came from that, just of modeling the decisions I make and what I click on. And it was actually really easier than I thought. I just kind of winged it, but I had a topic. So I kept going. You can tell bees were my topic for my HyperDoc. I'm not going to talk forever about this. I'm just going to finish up real quick. Sarah's, you guys are laughing because they've had to listen to me talk about bees for like 6 months. I'm really into this, but you can now see where the bees come from, right? So as we went through it, and I think it went really well because I had that mentor text. But then, okay, I've got to plug Adobe Spark Pages here because I decided that that's how we were going to share our products. We were going to do Adobe Spark reports on these pages because they're beautiful scrolling web pages. So I did a mentor text, where have all the bees gone? And when I showed this to them, they're like, we get to make those? And I'm like, yeah, you're going to pick a good idea from all those videos or one of your own. You're going to do the research, and you're going to create this really dynamic way to present a report. Now, I didn't finish because on here, what can you do? I just said plant these. And and then include the bibliography right in here. We were really big on the research part about that. But this was such a big part of it. I mean, this is how I wanted them to share what they found out from these good ideas. That where have all the bees gone is the problem, but now how can we start making some solutions to these big problems? Well, the kids learned how to make these from here. All the instructions were there. They had a spot where they could turn in their pages here, but then instead of having each kid stand up one at a time and present, we put it on a Google form. And they could choose which one they're reviewing. And these are all the kids' projects here.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so then they had to answer these 4 questions. Your thoughts about the topic, ideas, solutions you have, who needs to see this information, who should we share it with, and feedback for the Spark design. Well, look at what the kids did. Here, I opened one. This is one of the kids' projects, the worst kind of poverty, energy poverty. And they started to talk about the amount of people living without electricity. And it was absolutely, and look at this beautiful report. I mean, gone from the days, I mean, this is just a different way of doing the 5-paragraph essay report. But look how powerful this is. Well, not only that, we wanted, one of our goals, Cassidy and I, was to get other kids to learn from these reports. Look at, there's some solutions, things we can do. And, you know, the videos, here come the videos that inspired them. She wanted other kids to learn in a way that kids love learning. And that's this way, you know, with multimedia, with these transmedia kinds of websites that student created content. There's more links to learn more, you know, and in conclusion, and their bibliographies. I mean, it was just such a complete project there. That when they did this, then they went back and said, what ideas, this was actually the most important part. So now you made these, who needs to see these? And which one are you going to pursue? And it ended up being that you would pursue this for your 20-time project to come up with a good solution. So, you know, it's kind of a roundabout way. Look at all the layers we got in there, though. And I promise, girls, I will stop talking about the bees, but...
Well, that's where you get your inspiration.
That's
something
where,
that
yeah.
sparked your own curiosity.
And it just kept building and building. But that took like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was not a like get on and run through it at your own pace. We kept them in each of those boxes and did reflection at each point, which was big too.
Yeah. Very good. I see the thing I think that I love about this is that, well, I mean, lots of things that I love about it is you said it's basically kind of like the 5-paragraph essay. Not that that's evil. And I know that with English teachers, everybody's got an opinion on the 5-paragraph essay and everything. But the thing that I love about it is that you showed it to the kids and they said, we get to make those. Yes. I mean, when you get that reaction, something is going right. And the fact that now they're not just banging out the 5-paragraph essay in a document, double space, Times New Roman, 10-point, with 1-inch margins. It's like, we're not doing it that way. We're doing it in, you know, these Adobe Spark pages where you're creating a website, whether you use Spark or not. You know, the fact that they were creating a website and they were doing small blocks of text. There were images with it. There were little pull-out quotes. So there was a single line or maybe 2 lines of something important that acted kind of like a subheader or a way to break up the text and everything. That's more, to me, that's more of a real world skill. Building a web page in a way that people will actually consume it and actually look at it instead of creating a big, you know, a big thick block of text. I think that prepares them for something that they can actually use. And it's also preparing the text to actually be read and consumed by a real live human. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have to jump in on this because you have set me up perfectly, Matt, without even realizing it. So the irony is that also using Adobe Spark, I've been studying this whole idea of macro writing versus micro writing, and that's exactly what you're describing. So macro writing tends to be the traditional 5-paragraph essay or, you know, writing chapter, you know, longer chunks of text, basically. And this whole idea of micro writing is like, okay, well, it's 2018. We generally live in these like short, succinct little micro pieces of writing, right? That's what either, you know, short videos, you know, even 5-minute videos tend to be too long, you know. So I worked with a class where we said, okay, you guys, you kind of have to do some of that traditional writing. One of the 3 common core genres is argument writing. You guys just wrote these beautiful argument pieces. You spent, you know, 2 to 3 weeks working on them. You did your research. You found something you're passionate about, blah, 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 blah. But we need to do more than that because in today's society, we're asked to put out our opinions and thoughts in like little short, you know, chunks of text. And so then I said, okay, I want to spend like 3-ish days coming in and kind of dangling a little carrot and say, hey guys, let's now take all that writing that you did and do a shorter version of the same concepts and practice other skills around like how do you say what you need to say in a short period of time. And so I developed a HyperDoc that's just creating PSAs, and PSAs are not new necessarily, but when you package it up in a HyperDoc and say, okay, you're going to use this really cool tool to say what you just said in your 5-paragraph essay in a 30-second to 45-second PSA, what is that going to look like? And so I'm going to do a quick screen share and walk you quickly through a HyperDoc that I think just really speaks to this idea of balancing that in our classrooms, right? Teachers are kind of still wanting to do that more traditional work, but also also find a way to make it more succinct and to the point to meet today's learners' needs, right? So this was just like, hey, you guys, you're going to create a PSA. We went and explored mentor text, and mentor text, like Kelly mentioned, is something that I might be teaching across my curriculum. You know, if I'm in math, I'm going to teach a concept of mentor text. Let's see how this person responded to the writing. So here's some mentor PSAs. They're going to study these. And the funny thing about this is after I created this HyperDoc, you guys are going to laugh. I looked at the pictures that I pulled from the internet, these beautiful images with these, so it's like they're social posters, basically social advocacy posters. And I'm like, oh my God, they could create these using Post. So I'm like, oh my gosh, they could even go back and say in one poster kind of like what their little statement to the world is, right? So anyway, so they explore these videos. And then,
I love that. Oh my God.
I'm just loving it. And that came after that idea. So the whole point is they're going to create a PSA video, but as I'm building my HyperDoc, I'm like, oh, and they can create a social advocacy poster so quickly using Post, which is going to be even more succinct and micro-skilled writing, right? So 5-paragraph essay, 45-second video. Okay, now a poster, right? Like, just continuing to teach our students the skills of being more succinct and precise with your language. And so here's the explanation slide, and you can kind of see my notes down below. It's like you start out whole group, there's some partner sharing, then there's a whole group share out. Then you go into this more teacher-driven whole group where it's like, here's basically what I want you to learn about, you know, public service announcements. Then I had them go back and re-explore the examples. So when you talk about our lesson design, sometimes you have them do the explore again, but like more focused this time with a different lens. And they're able to jot their thinking down on the slides. And then here's the big application piece. And we did partner brainstorming. And I literally pulled this content directly from Adobe Spark templates, the video templates that they have. This one was called Promote an Idea. So this whole piece right here is actually the students just filling in the blank to prepare them to quickly create their video. Then they go on through Adobe and they create a video. And I mean, literally, I put on the tutorials, but of course they don't watch them. They think they don't need the tutorial videos anymore. I did walk them through the process of how I created my example. And I'm literally standing in front of a room of 33 10-year-olds saying, quiet on the set, quiet on the set. Let me just record and show you how easy this is. And they're like, what? You just made that? You know, it's so simple and so easy. And then I had them share. And then, you know, and at the end of the day, this is me checking in, like, what objectives did I just hit? So, I mean, to your point, as teachers, like, we're trying to blend all of that, right? Like, sometimes I need to walk my kids through like a longer process piece and focus on some of those skills of elaboration and description and like those kinds of things. And then sometimes, no, like, our kids today don't need to be so skilled at that. They need to practice some other more micro skills. And so I think what's beautiful about Spark and all the different tools out there is as you're designing the parts of a HyperDoc, you're thinking like, what are my objectives and what tools, templates, conversations, you know, whole group, independent, you know, all that stuff is going to fit with that the best. And so it was really neat to see kids take their passion topic and then work with a partner who had the same passion topic and create a video in like we did the whole thing start to finish in like 3 days. And so working on completely different skill set, you know, so it's kind of neat. And that's digital publishing, and that's all part of, you know, the standards we're also trying to accomplish. So I think building in that blend is kind of amazing. And so.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I loved about that last one that you showed us was that you had all of these different dynamics. You had some whole group, you had some small group, you had partners, you had individual things. And I think a lot of times people see HyperDocs and they think, oh, it's something where the kid is going to get like focused in on their own device. And it's like nothing else is going on around them. And I'm just going to work my way down through the document and, you know, do all the different steps all by myself. But that wasn't a very individual, I mean, it was still student centered, but it wasn't like I'm going to do this all on my own type of thing. There were all of these different dynamics and it pulled, I love how that all happened.
And then you're watching the kids negotiate ideas.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You laugh and say everyone's trying to go 1-to-1, but we always love when you're 2-to-1 or 3-to-1.
We rarely create
Yes.
We rarely create for this to be done by an individual. we are mostly with that blend in there, with that with its whole group, its partners, I think that's a misconception. I'm glad it came up today.
For sure, because typically, like, a lot of the parts of a HyperDoc are sometimes things that teachers are saying, oh yeah, I've already put I have 5 different assignments in my Google Classroom around the same thing. And if I just packaged it all in one place and given the kids and guided them through each step, then you have your, pretty much your lesson coming together more.
And that's one blend, right? One blend is that mix of whole group, independent, partner. Another blend is paper mixed in with your, your tech. Right? And then another blend, another byproduct is I left that classroom and did that lesson. And the teacher did an art project. She had the kids create a sketch of themselves holding up an advocacy poster, like a sign. And so it was like she did a whole follow-up art piece. And it's like, those are all the different, when we say blended learning, I think it's on tech, off tech. It's, there's just so many different ways to blend. And I think we love HyperDocs because you're making those decisions throughout the design process.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're really designing with like delivery in mind. Like, these are my kids. How's this going to all play out? And so it just really kind of gives you a chance to check all those different boxes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Which I totally love. I wanted to mention, by the way, it's so funny because several of the examples that we've been giving have to do with Adobe products. And of course, Adobe Spark is our sponsor. I wanted to mention the fact that we aren't obligated by Adobe to talk about all of their products like the whole time. This isn't a sales pitch for Adobe. It just happens, which I think is a testament to their products, that it just like naturally is coming out of us. So I wanted to kind of clarify that. And, the kinds of stuff, I also have to mention the kinds of stuff that we're hearing in here is also the stuff that you get to see in this fabulous book. If you want to do a deeper dive into HyperDocs, the HyperDoc handbook is what you want to check out. And so the thing I love about it is that you have all of these examples of what it can look like, but then it does talk about, the learning theory behind it and how is it that, like on this one, we're talking about creation. And, how does it all come together? So if you want to go deeper into that, you can. The other thing that's great too is that you don't have to buy the book to get a lot of the basics and to get started on it. You can just go to that website, hyperdocs.co. And, these ladies have made so much available to us. So I think the 3 of you are going to be just as shocked at what I'm going to say because this has gone so fast. I'm going to pitch our last question to you. Can you believe that this is almost over?
Yeah. Well,
isn't that nuts? Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is sort of at the heart of everything that we've been talking about so far, but I wanted to do a little more intentional pivot to this specific topic, is that the reason that I think HyperDocs have been such a hit and teaching in this way has been such a hit is because it works, is because the theory backs it up. It's all based on best practices. It's based on how our brain works. It's based on how we learn. It works, and I wanted us to kind of end on touching on some of that stuff. So the big picture question here is, how do we know that HyperDocs work? And I know there's some brain research stuff that goes behind this, but then I know there's lots of things here. So let me just pitch it to you and that question: how do we know that they work?
Oh, I'll just start really quick by saying HyperDocs work because you are the designer and you know your students. So you start knowing your students and you start bringing in what you know about these best practices. And yes, there's the brain part too, which we could go onto a whole, I think we're going to have another webinar.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because I can say that, but I mean, without quoting the research, teachers, if they really can think about their students and design with them in mind, then you're going to bring in that culturally relevant pedagogy. You're going to bring in the way that you talk to them in the classroom, and your personality is going to come out in your HyperDoc, and you're going to own it when you're delivering instruction. There's also a lot of research around teaching and instructional design and trust and relationships and connection. So when you put the time in to think about your students and create a connection and think about all the steps that you're going to take with them, they're going to be right there with you. So that's just one thing that comes to mind first. Because what do we do first in the beginning of the year, which is right around the corner? We get to know our students. And then we can really design with them in mind.
You know what? I'm going to piggyback off what she said, because of course we're like going to keep thinking here, one brain, we call each other. But I think it also is being really present in the classroom when you're teaching. And really, I study my students while they're studying the content. And once I got away from the front of the classroom and I was really with them, then I knew to what degree they were getting it. I was able to personally nudge kids, work on the HyperDoc with them, or pull a small group, or work with my language learners, or those who had trouble keeping on task. And that's how I went around and kind of got the gist, what was sticking, what was not. And then that guided my direct instruction and actually made my direct instruction time go way down. I was able to increase their work time and be with them, which was way more valuable.
So Lisa, that is exactly what I was going to say, because at the end of the day, how do we know something's working? By observing our students, sitting beside our students. I mean, the word assessment comes from the word to sit beside. And like the irony of, you know, putting a child in front of a HyperDoc is that you are free to go and sit with them. And it does, that's the magic of it, is that you now are able to be with your kids. It's the craziest thing. But it's so amazing. And then just to add on, like, what's that?
Nobody's asking, where's that link? What's the
I know. Well, and it's like, how do we know if our kids are learning? By sitting next to them and observing their body language and asking questions and answering questions and watching their expressions as they learn a new concept, and the aha moment, you know, all that stuff is magic. But just to add on, like, I think for me too, one thing that, because we are always checking in to make sure that that HyperDocs are being effective. That's really important to us, as we, you know, rally educators around the world to try these out, is that we see teachers that are like excited to teach again. And I think that's another testament to something that's working, is because at the end of the day, teaching is such a hard profession. Everyone is working so hard. And so for us to know if something's working is just to see the sheer like joy again that teachers have as they design and create and build lessons and collaborate, build lessons. And so I think another way to know if students are learning is whether or not the teachers are excited to teach, because that's the ultimate factor. Like, we know that the number one way to, you know, increase student achievement is through the teacher. And so, so I think when teachers are happy to design and teach through HyperDocs, then that's ultimately another like pathway. Shout out to all the teachers who are trying new things and giving this a shot and reflecting and tweaking. And so that's what's going to make better learning in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we see so many teachers that are leaving the profession and they get burned out. And, you know, they talk about how if you can hang around more than 5 years, then you're kind of ahead of the curve. And it's just so sad to hear that. And, you know, you picture the teacher that's frazzled at the end of the day and has done a million things and still has this huge stack of grading afterwards. And it's just like, it kind of sucks the soul out of you. And it makes it so hard to remember why we got into it in the first place. And I think you're right. When you start to see people getting excited about teaching again, you know, I'll see, and it's a wide variety of things, but HyperDocs definitely has this effect too, where you see a teacher that's been around for 25 years and they're like, I was about to give up, or I thought that I was going to have to suffer through 10 more years of the same drudgery, but then I found this and it's changed everything. You know, I think that's really where things matter, you know. And then when we're happy to teach, then the kids are happy to learn. And I mean, there's just this reciprocal relationship with all that. And I also have to say too, that while I was listening to this last question, I found a quote. Here I am with my paper again. I study my students when they study the content. Now, I'm going to tweet that out today. The video is not available as of this moment while we're recording it, but that's going to be a little teaser that I'm going to put out on Twitter right after we're done. So this has been...
That's that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and I just have to give a shout out to the way we hold this community together is through Teachers Give Teachers.
Yes.
Really important to us that teachers who are creating feel brave to share their work. It's all in progress. We're not here to judge each other's work. It's personal to them and their classroom. We don't know where they started or where they're going with that lesson. So that's important to remember, but put your name on your things you're sharing. And then when you want one, you just go to teachersgiveteachers.net or on Twitter at TSGiveTS. Find the HyperDoc, make a copy of it, but keep the original author's name on it and just add your name. We're starting to see multiple names across the bottom of HyperDocs where they're just getting revised and revised. If you don't like it, you don't think it's a high quality lesson, then you elevate it to what you think it should be. That's the whole point. You don't have to start from the beginning on everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. You know, I think it's interesting how the byline, you know, I'm from the journalism world. They call that the byline, you know, who wrote it. And it gets longer and longer when you add all of those attributions. And then I started to think, like, what are the things that I tell people about HyperDocs whenever I talk about them, and then I can start to trace that backwards. Like, I sat in a session with Sean Fahey, who's a teacher here in Indiana, who presented alongside of Lisa, who is, you know, it's like I can start to trace back all of those things of like what I share too. And so, yeah, having that attribution there is crucial. So, oh my goodness, this has been so good. We could go on and on. And I bet some of you that are watching are probably like, please go on and on and on. But like anything, any good thing, it has to come to an end. So I think we're going to wrap it up right here. We do have all of the links to everything that we're talking about today, contact information. Of course, you can get free professional development credits. All of that stuff is available at ditchsummit.com down at the bottom of the page. So definitely check that out while the summit is still live. And yeah, I foresee lots and lots more collaboration around all of this in the future. And this has been such a joy. You know, we did a Ditch Summit session when I very first did the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, the very first one. You know, these ladies joined, and it was a very memorable, very practical session, and I think that this was no exception. So I want to thank all three of you. You were talking about how hard it is to get all three of you together, even in a digital space, and so we are so grateful that you did, and I think all of us are better off from it. And so thank you all for coming, and I'm going to wrap this up here. And I hope that all of you that are watching will continue to watch the other videos that you may not have seen, and we will see you on the next broadcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.